How can we deserve to go through with 3 points and a -3 goal difference? It's a ludicrous format, and we don't deserve to go through. If we do go through, it would actually be slightly embarrassing right now.
The squad makes sense until you're 10 minutes away from drawing 0-0 with Ghana and you're watching a low block and going, where's Adam Wharton? Where's Cole Palmer? Where's Trent Alexander-Arnold?
He's focused on perfecting plan A and getting this sort of happy group, and who knows, it might work for him. But the danger there is, has he left himself enough tools in the box? That's what I wonder.
Hello and welcome to the Game Football Podcast from the Times and Sunday Times. These are our daily World Cup shows bringing you the best analysis and news from the 2026 tournament. This is day 14. I'm Tom Clarke, and for part one, I'm joined by the former Scotland under-21 international Gregor Robertson to discuss Scotland's 3-0 defeat against Brazil, which leaves their qualification hopes for the knockout stage hanging by a thread. It was a difficult watch, even for me, I've got to say. I'm sure that's probably quite annoying for you to hear, but immediate reactions. We're recording this at 2:00 in the morning. Immediate thoughts now.
I thought it was a very strange game. I think some of just reading one or two comments to emerge from the players, from John McGinn and Andy Robertson, and they kind of echoed the sentiments I had during the game, which was like Brazil almost lulled us into a false sense of security. Why they felt quite why they felt the need to do that, I'm not sure. That's what seemed strange to me. But we had a lot of the ball. We moved it around like as ever. We had almost no threat in actually the opposition's third, but we moved it around against Brazil, and it was feeling like, oh, this is not so bad. And then we just shot ourselves in the foot, in the other foot, and then in both kneecaps. And yeah, how can you ever wish to do anything in a World Cup if you give away goals like that? And particularly at that timing in a game as well, for the second game in a row. So yeah, that was extraordinary. It was just like, I can't believe, surreal to watch. I can't believe this is happening, sort of stuff. And the second goal wasn't that much better. Andy Robertson, gifted possession far too easily back to Brazil on the edge of their own box. And it was a great cross, but Angus Gunn's had a pretty good tournament, I think, on the whole, but he kind of got caught under that one for Vinny Jr. to nod in the second. And Kieran Tierney was kind of shrugged off the ball for the third when he came on. He was actually probably our best attacking threat, and he came on for the second half. So it was weird. I actually kind of was going into weird sort of like daydreams about picturing Carlo Ancelotti sort of just talking to the players in the change room, the Brazil players, saying, lads, you don't need to press them. You don't really need to try and win the ball back. They'll give you it. And then when they give you it, you can punish them. And that's what happened. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that was basically his team talk.
Yeah, I think that was maybe one of the more damaging aspects, was that you felt Brazil were in first gear for a lot of that game. And maybe the lack of intensity, as you say, kind of didn't really help Scotland. I mean, reflecting on this game and the Morocco game and thinking, I've been up watching these games, and as I say, I feel a frustration for you that there's not been more of a kind of, punches thrown by this Scotland team, because you quite rightly highlight that frailties in defence at times, but in midfield and attacking areas, you've got some very good players. And we've said so often that these tournaments are about players of, certain levels that maybe, we're, as football fans, accustomed to not seeing amazing things from, delivering on the biggest stage. And I found myself being frustrated that the likes of McGinn, McTominay, and some of the others in midfield, who are good players, very good players at times, aren't either allowed to offer more, aren't finding themselves confident enough to. I just can't work it out. What do you think that is? Because we've ended up talking about Scotland's defence, Grant Hanley in the Morocco game, Jack Hendry tonight, and other things, rather than ever talking about McGinn, McTominay, and some of your better players.
Yeah, look, if I had the answer to why that's the case, I would. I don't know. I'd be a happy man, and I would be telling you it.
You wouldn't be sat here with me.
I mean, like, for me, just all those players you're talking about, almost anyone, in fact, when you get into the final third, they look so isolated. They don't really. The only time there's ever been any sort of patterns or any sort of decent link-up play has been down the left with Tierney or with Robertson, and usually McGinn or someone, just like little 1-2s or little kind of overloads on the flanks, or in very kind of fleeting moments when Ben Gannon got on the ball. And like, I was really, like, when I looked at the team selection today, I was pretty pleased with it. I was glad that Gannon was playing and offered that potential outlet. He just never really got the opportunity. He had one or two kind of 40s in the first half. Kept trying to make that run inside as well, which was a decent ploy, but Brazil had Gabriel mopping up. They've got some very good players, despite this still not being a Brazil team I'm all that convinced about. And yeah, then there's the kind of Scott McTominay question. He's just not really arrived at the tournament at all. And, you know, all the chances that fell to us in the second half tended to fall to McTominay, and he's the man you want them to fall to, and it just wasn't happening. He had that header that Alisson kind of got down to. He had the chance right at the end I think it was on his left foot. He kind of swept it, but just not with any power. And I don't know, he just didn't seem like he was in the groove, in his flow. And that could be said about, as you say, about really all of our sort of talisman players who have stepped up and been really, really big players for Scotland over the years, and particularly in the last year or so. It's just not happened for them. And like, the questions will inevitably fall to Steve Clarke. He's just signed a new contract to 2030. Like, you have got to remember, like, the context, where we've been or where we've not been. We've not been at the party for so long. We've not been at World Cup since 1998. Before that, it was, I think, 22 years before we'd been at a major tournament at all, before we got to the Euros, and now it's a regular occurrence. But we've been awfully, awfully disappointing on each occasion when we've reached there. And like, you know, I was holding on to some positives in terms of like the way we played for spells and reacted against Morocco. I started watching this game thinking, yeah, this looks good, we're confident, and then, yeah, you can't make mistakes like that in the World Cup.
Yeah, Steve Clarke speaking after the game, saying, you see the quality in the final third of the pitch from Brazil. We didn't have that tonight. It wasn't enough. Let's be honest, the best team won. You cannot make the mistakes at this level because it puts you on the back foot and it becomes a long night for sure. I think we're going home. Just before we get on to potential chances and we, you know, try and talk about supercomputers and statistical nonsense and get you wound up about that in a minute, mate. But on Steve Clarke, how are you reflecting on it now? Because you yourself on this podcast and in articles for the previous Euros have expressed frustration at getting to these tournaments and then not delivering. We're sat here now, 3 points, a win against Haiti, but ultimately maybe underclubbing it still. Are you looking at that new contract before the tournament and thinking that maybe sends the wrong message, or is this, you know, the classic kind of reflection of a podcast host and sports editor that I'm trying to mix it after a difficult game?
Look, undoubtedly there'll be sections of the population in Scotland who will very much think that was a mistake, and were probably, even before the World Cup, and even despite the miracle against Denmark, we're still slightly uneasy about that for the reasons that we've just seen, that we still seem to be really conservative in when we get to these tournaments. My position has always been, I've no idea who's going to take over. And I had this conversation tonight. I'm actually looking at that we're probably drawn towards the end of an era now with players like Andy Robertson. Like McGinn got a good few years in him still, and he's into his 30s. Kieran Tierney, you can't rely upon in terms of his injury record. Like Grant Hanley's done, like Kenny McLean. It's a group of players who've kind of grown together, and whatever we say about how poorly we've performed at major tournaments, they've achieved a lot, and that era's kind of drawn to a close. But I'm not sure who comes next in terms of the playing squad as well. I'm not sure we have players of that kind of stature, or even potentially of that stature, ready to step into fill their shoes. So the manager's one thing, but I'd say the playing squad is another. But with Steve Clarke, I still think you have to look at the bigger picture and what he's done. He's the longest serving Scotland manager now. He has made it a regular occurrence. Although we have to say, again, this is a bigger conversation. There's different avenues of qualifying now. Even like if we were to somehow miraculously qualify for the round of 32, it would be with a huge kind of asterisk, because it's a bit of a farce, really. I don't want to be watching Scotland playing Brazil and listen to Liam McLeod, the commentator, talking about another goal will give us a 30% uptick in Opta's chances of us qualifying. This is not what a World Cup should be about. So it's the same in terms of qualifying. We had the Nations League to help us qualify, but we got there. So Steve Clarke undoubtedly has an enormous amount of credit in the bank, but this has been another hugely disappointing outcome. And there are some things about the team selection and the way he's kind of approached it that have confused me. I mean, like, is
there anything you'd change now, sat here reflecting?
I just find it slightly confusing that we started the tournament with this, like, a lot of sort of momentum behind Lawrence Shankland. We had a great season and was scoring goals in the two friendlies leading up to the tournament. Started in a kind of 4-4-2 against Haiti, and then wasn't seen at all as we introduced two strikers. After Che Adams, we introduced Lyndon Dykes, we introduced Ross Stewart. He was just still on the bench in the second game against Morocco. And then he starts against Brazil on his own up front and plays for 90 minutes. Like, it was brought off in the 90th minute. He wasn't replaced until the 90th minute. Like, that's all a bit confused to me. But having said all that, I don't think it matters who we play up front. They never get the ball. They look isolated. They chase lost causes. They have to fight to win headers and hold on to scraps. And it's a difficult, thankless task for anyone. And none of them have really the kind of individual quality to cut it at this level either. So that, like, I can see why Steve Clarke has kind of floundered and been kind of flapping around in the dark trying to figure out who's best to play up front. And I can see why he turned to McKenna after Hanley. Ultimately, what he's doing is trying to make decisions that make up for our inadequacies. And two of the biggest are in terms of a centre forward and the centre of our defence. Like, we're playing Grant Hanley, who's 35 and doesn't always get a game for Hibs, like in the World Cup, alongside Jack Henry, who's playing in the Saudi Pro League and is, you know, he actually performed well. He got away with a bit of a lucky one tonight. He has performed well, but these guys aren't really, like, to be brutal about it, they aren't good enough when you get to this level. And there are other areas of the team that are, but for everything we're talking about in terms of Steve Clarke's decisions, like, there are reasons for it. We're ultimately not good enough in certain areas of the pitch.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Once you unpick it all, it becomes quite challenging to be Steve Clarke, and maybe it's not a job that many people would be desperate for. So we'll see what happens in the coming days. Just finally, Gregor, earlier in the night, Group B played out and Bosnia getting a win. That means they finish in third with 4 points, a win against Qatar with some good goals. I should just say, in the other game, I don't know whether you caught Switzerland-Canada.
Yes.
Did you see Promise David's goal?
I did. Unbelievable.
I'm having that as goal of the tournament. What a move. What a ball over the top. Touch, cross, outstretched volley from one of the great names of the game, surely. Promise David. I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. If you've not seen it, listeners, please go and check out the highlights to Switzerland against Canada. Also go and check out the highlights to Morocco v Haiti, because, Gregor Robertson, you can watch two games at once, and I was watching Brazil-Scotland, but Morocco-Haiti is a banger. And speaking of good goals, Wilson Isidore's screamer is one of the purest strikes of a football I've seen for a long, long time. It's proper Have-It vibes, and he absolutely thunder blasts it into the top corner. Fantastic stuff. Definitely go and check out the highlights to that one. That might cheer you up. But just as a final note then, as I mentioned there, with Bosnia finishing in third with those 4 points, you've hinted there about supercomputers, and I mentioned the Steve Clarke quote that, you know, Scotland are almost certainly going out, in his opinion. Do you think that Scotland deserve to go through as it stands?
No, I mean, it's clear.
So you're going to be watching the rest of the group stage, obviously, you know, not suggesting that you're not a fan, so you wouldn't be like, oh, great fun, this would be good. But actually sat here now after your 3 games, you don't think they deserve to go through?
No. I mean, like, I saw a line from Steve Clarke saying only Scotland can pull, you know, can play Haiti in the first game and then have two nations in the top 10 after that. Like, yeah, we had a tough draw, but there were exciting games, and, you know, we were we took it close against Morocco, and we kind of stumbled past Haiti with a deflected goal. And ultimately, no. I mean, how can we deserve to go through with 3 points and a -3 goal difference? We discussed it in recent shows. Like the format is hugely flawed, and I think we're starting to see it already. Like just the fact that even the way you're kind of consuming games is influenced by an Opta supercomputer. You're like, it's bizarre. And how it can be, a 42% chance, I have no idea. And I actually don't really care. I think it's a ludicrous format, and we don't deserve to go through. If we do go through, it would actually be slightly embarrassing right now.
A tough night for Scotland. Gregor Robertson, thank you very much for joining us. As always, stick with us. In part 2, we're going to be hearing from Johnny Northcroft in the England camp. We'll be back just after this break. Welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from the Times and Sunday Times. These are our daily World Cup shows. I'm Tom Clarke, and for part 2, I'm joined by our chief football correspondent and football journalist of the year, Johnny Northcroft. Johnny, you join me from the England camp to talk about England, but I cannot not ask you about Scotland. As a proud Scot yourself, you were part of the Scotland preview shows. How are you feeling? Gregor's final note was that Scotland didn't deserve to go through. Anything more upbeat from you, or about the same?
Absolutely not. I can't disagree. I've seen it all before, but every time you watch it, it's brutally painful. Just how Scotland try and aren't good enough, really. I think we've known that deep down. Certainly since the first game, but probably before. And there was always a hope that Steve Clarke might manage to get us one decent result against Morocco or Brazil. But tonight was like, there's a couple of things that Scotland struggle to live up to the fans, and it's another game where we arrive being celebrated off the pitch, and then the whistle blows. And we see that within 7 minutes we concede a pathetic goal. And there's that tactic when a coach identifies a weak player in the opposition who you can just give them the ball, and then they'll give it back to you. It's like Carlo Ancelotti sort of saw 11 of those and just gave us the ball and let us work ourselves into our doom. So look, Gregor's right. We don't really deserve to go through. We still might. Steve Clarke doesn't think so. History tells you something will happen to mathematically mean that we're the last team to miss out. But if we do, I don't think we can really complain. And it's been, I found the first game torturous, and they've got progressively worse. Fair play to Brazil, but bottom line is technically, and probably in terms of courage and tactically, Scotland haven't been good enough in tournaments under Steve Clarke, and certainly weren't good enough tonight.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of Scotland fans listening to this will agree with the team there. But if you do have views on Scotland at this tournament, do get in touch with me, tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk. As I say, Johnny, you're joining us from the England camp. Plenty of ponderings for England as well after that draw with Ghana. I read out the intro to your brilliant piece, Match Report, on yesterday's show, which I think summed things up nicely. A couple of points that I wanted to ask you about from developments of the day. Firstly, some news on Reece James. Can you give us the latest on that?
Yeah, I mean, Reece James has got a tight hamstring. He's being assessed. We don't know what the severity is at this stage, but it seems very unlikely that he'll be fielded against Panama. I think that was always unlikely anyway. If you look through his recent years, he struggles to play 3 games in a week. Now, ideally, England would have got the job done properly last night, and they haven't. And maybe there would have been a temptation to try and play Reece James. I think the sort of hamstring situation takes that temptation away. One of the things that strikes you is he's a profile different to the other right backs for sure. And we'll get on to the composition of the squad, but it feels even more strange that Trevor Chalobah was the player brought in when Tino Livramento went home with an injury, because now you're looking at a right-back cover that is going to be a centre-back possibly playing either Jarell Konsa or we believe perhaps Ezri Konsa is even further ahead. And that changes the balance of what England are going to be. And like, as I say, makes you wonder again why there's not proper right back cover, why Trent Alexander-Arnold isn't here.
Yeah, well, let's get on to the composition of that squad, because that's the theme of your day 2 analysis on the Times website now, headlined, "Have England got too many vibes men and not enough game changers?" I mean, this is Thomas Tuchel's problem, isn't it, with that squad that he selected? You outlined it, Martin Samuel outlined it. I think we must have mentioned it on nearly every preview podcast. The squad makes sense until you're 10 minutes away from drawing 0-0 with Ghana and you're watching a low block and going, where's Adam Wharton? Where's Cole Palmer? Where's Trent Alexander-Arnold? You know, I think I specifically remember you outlining those 3 players when the squad was selected. We did a reaction pod and you said, look, it all makes sense. It's all fine. I'm on board, apart from that moment.
Yep.
And England fans had that moment. And there are a lot of fans below the lines, Time subscribers, a lot of people in the comments on this podcast as well, echoing that exact point. That is his difficulty now, isn't it, Thomas Tuchel?
It is, and the difficulty of his own making. And those 3 players, I put those exact 3 names to him at the squad announcement and said, look, do you think you've left yourself short of that player that plays a different pass, that can just do something a little bit outside the box or something a little bit riskier than the others? Just rip up the script. And you know, what I've tried to delve into in my piece today is that Tuchel's very much a plan A man. He's got a particular way of playing that he wants to perfect, actually. So if it's not working, you know, typically he looks at penetration from passing triangles and the wide players. And his version of if it's not working is to change the wide players or to try and do better at set pieces or whatever. And that idea of needing a different type doesn't really sit with him. So what he's done in the squad is chosen, you know, players of similar profile and then made the rest of the squad up with guys who are there for culture, for vibes. You know, I was looking at the bench yesterday. I mean, you know, you've got 3 reserve centre-backs now, 3 non-playing centre-backs at the moment in Dan Burn, Chalobah and Konsa, 3. And then there's John Stones sitting there as well. You've got, you know, Ivan Toney, who Tuchel's sort of looking on only for very, very particular circumstances, like penalty shootouts or last 5 minutes of a knockout game where you need a goal. You've got Jordan Henderson there for the culture. You've got 4th choice goalkeeper added for the culture. So he's focused on perfecting plan A and getting this sort of happy group. And who knows, it might work for him. But the danger is that has he left himself enough tools in the box? That's what I wonder. It certainly felt like they could have done with something different yesterday. He didn't like the question when it was put to him by ITV's Gregor Clarke about lack of imagination. That's not how he sees the game. But surely when you've got 26 players and then you get to replace a player, surely amid all of that, there was room for somebody who offers a little bit different. And I think what England have to hope for now is that, yes, this is a team that is set up to do well against top sides. And when there's a bit of space, you know, he's got players who need space, running players. So maybe against the good opponents, the better opponents, this side will work. But what if that round of 32 game is against a team that plays a bit like Ghana, DR Congo maybe, and Algeria, maybe Cape Verde. If you repeat last night's game, you end up in a penalty shootout.
Yeah, I just wanted, before we get on to Panama and potentially going forward, just wanted to ask about Ivan Toney. It was a topic that I had mentioned to Gregor and Alison in the post-match reaction show. And Alison used phrases talking about, in these games when there's a low block, don't be so ponderous, create a bit of chaos, just try and disrupt Ghana. I mean, I was watching it thinking, if Ivan Toney's your wild card, or one of 3 wild cards, is the last 10 minutes against a low block not the time for a wild card? Or at least Ollie Watkins and Harry Kane. I just found that really interesting that Rodgers came on, Eze came on, Rashford came on, Saka came on. But as you say, it's just like for like replacements, really. So how do you change that? Is there a scenario in which we will see Harry Kane and another striker, do you think? Or will it only be last 5 minutes against Algeria when England are 1-0 down?
Yeah, no, I think there's got to be. I totally agree with Alison. Like, that was an Ivan Toney scenario. The last sort of 10 minutes, England did manage to get the ball into the box more, and it was curious he didn't come on. Tuchel did make one kind of sort of unorthodox change, which was taking Elliot Anderson off and putting Eze on so he could play with 2 number 10s. But, it didn't really work. And yeah, I was a bit confused. Because when he explained the Ivan Toney selection to us, he said not only is it because of what Toney offers in terms of aerial prowess, blah blah blah, but it's what he does to Harry Kane. It's the fact that Harry suddenly becomes a free player in the box and not the guy that's being marked by everyone. And I thought that was the scenario for it last night. So it's a curious one. Tuchel didn't seem that bothered, and maybe we are getting too bothered because this is what happens in tournaments. England win the first game, we get too excited. They flop in the second, we get too despondent, and then they're all right in the end. And maybe Tuchel's looking at this going, "Come on, lads." And Harry Kane said to calm down last night as well. But I was left a bit concerned.
In terms of moving forwards now, obviously another reflection that we were having yesterday is that Panama becomes a different game now. Martin Samuel, our colleague, has written about this on the Times website now. We can't afford any complacency as an England camp. Also, maybe can't afford as many changes. I mean, Declan Rice walking out of the ground last night with a bit of a kind of ice pack on him. Hamza, our colleague, reporting that, he told him as he walked past, no, I'm fine. But I get the impression that Declan Rice is the kind of guy that could have the flu and he'd say, "Oh no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine." It does change this game now, doesn't it? Because whilst Reece James might well be rested, and as you said earlier, that might have always been the case, some of these other big players, we talked about the physical load and strain that they're under, maybe those changes can't be made. What do you expect selection-wise for this Panama game?
Yeah, I think ideal world, Declan Rice does get rested because this sort of problem he's got is not new. He was suffering towards the end of the season. I think in an ideal world, maybe Harry Kane was going to get rested in this game or at least spared the full 90 minutes. And I'm not quite sure that's possible now. Tuchel will rotate. He's told us that. But I think he's slightly limited because Panama are actually ranked above Ghana. I think the rankings are probably false, but they aren't mugs, as you say. And England... there's also something called momentum. You've got to try and play yourself into form and pick up momentum. And England lost all the momentum that they'd had from the second half against Croatia. So yeah, I think he's a bit limited, and that's a risk as well because we're about to go into this cycle where England will have the most packed schedule because that's the consequence of being the last group to play. And when the games are coming every 3 days. I think you want your players to be as fresh and rested as possible going into that. So I just think last night needlessly complicated everything for England. And Martin's right, we've seen them do it before.
Yeah, I'll tell you as well, Johnny, after watching the Panama-Croatia game, after wrapping up the work last night, England are going to get kicked. Panama don't mind a tackle. Listen, we learned that a couple of years ago. They ain't changed, I'm telling you that. Luka Modric got absolutely booted all over the pitch, as did the rest of the Croatia team. So listen, Declan Rice, whether he plays or not, be careful. Watch those ankles and knees. Just a final question then on some specifics and some players. Lots of people talking throughout this tournament about Marcus Rashford. Anthony Gordon starts again for those 2 games. I don't think necessarily has produced anything that maybe he can do. Maybe Barcelona fans will be hoping he can do next season. You talk about resting Declan Rice. Kobbie Mainoo is a player who sat on the bench, currently hasn't featured yet, and does at least have that kind of spark, desire to take the ball on a turn. Do you think we might see some of these players, some tweaks?
Yeah, I mean, the other aspect is you need to play players in case then you do have an injury and suddenly they become a starter. And Kobbie Mainoo is a great example of that. I would say he has to be the first cab off the rank in midfield. So he needs to play, he needs some minutes, and he probably should have come on last night because, as you say, Tom, he's good on the half turn. He's more intricate as a passer than the other ones. I see him as a pretty good five-a-side player almost, that he could sort of nip his way through sort of compact, congested areas with this passing. And Rashford was pretty miserable as he walked out of the stadium last night, and rightly so. He had to not only wait for Anthony Gordon to be taken off, but he then had to wait for Noni Madueke to be taken off because he went on. He switched wings, and Rasmus looked the most in form of all the wide players so far. So he has to start surely, and then, as I say, it becomes those judgment calls from Tuchel. I suspect Stones will come back and maybe Konsa does go across and he plays safe at the back, maybe goes for height and power to combat the Panamanians. But yeah, it's look, England are still going to go through, and you can talk yourself into despondency. But I used the word earlier. It's now just a bit more complicated.
Yeah, a bit more complicated, but you can help understand it all with Johnny's piece on the Times website now, and plenty of other brilliant coverage from all the Times team in the England camp. Johnny Northcroft, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you too for listening. We'll be back with another Daily World Cup show tomorrow. We'll see you then.